The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire stood to address the assembly. His 6 arms gestured dramatically, crystalline eyes gleaming with barely contained fear as he spoke to the gathered representatives of 47 different species. Honored delegates, we can no longer ignore the growing threat that approaches our borders. The humans have expanded beyond their quarantine zone, and the stories we hear from the Outer Rim systems grow more horrifying by the day. Murmurs rippled through the vast circular chamber. Representatives from species spanning the galaxy shifted nervously in their specialized seating arrangements. The aquatic Mertai bobbed anxiously in their water-filled diplomatic pods, while the gas-based ethereals flickered with agitated energy patterns. Council Speaker Velda, an ancient being whose species had achieved spaceflight when most worlds were still cooling from stellar formation, raised her withered hand for silence. Ambassador Zethkar, you speak of stories. We deal in facts here. Present your evidence. Zethkar activated his holographic display, showing grainy images captured by long-range surveillance drones. The first image showed a human settlement on a world that should have been uninhabitable. The surface temperature readings showed extremes that would kill most known life forms, yet the humans had not only survived but were thriving. This is the world of Kepler 438b. Surface temperatures range from negative 160 degrees Celsius in the polar regions to over 200 degrees at the equator. The atmosphere contains methane storms that would dissolve our ships' hulls, yet humans have established 3 major colonies there. The next image showed something even more disturbing. Human soldiers, if they could be called that, moving through what appeared to be a battlefield. But they weren't using vehicles or protective suits. They were running on foot through terrain that would challenge heavy machinery, carrying weapons that seemed impossibly primitive yet devastatingly effective. These creatures, Zethkar continued, his voice taking on a trembling quality, they don't just adapt to hostile environments. They seek them out. They find the most dangerous, inhospitable world in the galaxy and make them their homes. Our xenobiologists call it impossible, but the evidence is undeniable. Representative Quilnara of the Feathered Nest Collective stood up, her beautiful plumage ruffling with distress. With respect, Ambassador, adaptation is not uncommon among spacefaring species. My own people colonized gas giant atmospheres that would be lethal to most life forms. But you use technology, environmental suits, atmosphere processors, Zethkar replied. The humans do something far worse. They change themselves. The holographic display shifted to show medical scans taken from captured human equipment. The readings were so bizarre that several council members demanded verification from their own scientific advisors. These scans show human physiology after just 3 generations on high-radiation worlds. Their cellular structure has adapted to process radiation as an energy source, not through genetic engineering or technological augmentation, but through natural adaptation occurring at a rate that defies everything we know about evolution. The chamber erupted in shocked conversations. The concept was terrifying because it suggested that humans didn't just survive in impossible conditions, they incorporated those conditions into their very being, becoming something new and potentially more dangerous with each world they conquered. Dr. Zintao, the Council's chief xenobiologist, requested permission to speak. His insectoid frame clicked nervously as he accessed his databanks. I've been studying human expansion patterns for the past 50 standard years. What Ambassador Zethkar describes aligns with reports from across the galaxy, but there's something even more concerning. The holo display now showed a galactic map with human settlement patterns highlighted in red. Instead of the typical expansion from a home world in gradually widening circles, the human settlements formed in seemingly random pattern that made no strategic sense to conventional military thinking. They're not expanding for resources or strategic advantage, Dr. Zintao explained. Every world they've settled was previously classified as uninhabitable by our standards. They're specifically choosing the most hostile environments possible. Worlds with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, or dangerous radiation levels. Ambassador Mordun of the Silicon Collective processed this information through his crystalline neural matrix before responding. Perhaps they're simply a hardy species. Many civilizations have adapted to difficult homeworlds. That's what we thought initially, Zethkar responded. But the reports from our merchants and explorers tell a different story. These humans aren't just surviving on death worlds. They're thriving, multiplying, and, most disturbing of all, they seem to enjoy the challenge. The holo display showed intercepted human communications, translated into common galactic language. The messages were casual conversations between human colonists, but their content sent chills through the assembled delegates. Weather's been great lately. Only had 2 volcanic eruptions this week, and the acid rain has been light enough to work outside without full protection. Lucky you. We're dealing with a pack of those giant predators again. Sarah says it's good exercise for the kids to help with the hunt. Remember to send some of the meat our way if you bag one. It's been boring here since the earthquake swarm stopped. The casual tone of these messages, discussing deadly natural disasters and monster hunts as if they were pleasant weather reports, created an atmosphere of growing unease in the council chamber. There's more, Zethkar continued, his voice now barely above a whisper. The stories from trading posts speak of humans who laugh during combat, who volunteer for the most dangerous missions, who compete to see who can survive in the most hostile conditions. They call it fun. Representative Yilmoth of the Peaceful Garden Worlds stood up abruptly, her photosynthetic skin pale with fear. You're describing a species of warriors, but that's not unusual. The Korth Empire has a strong military tradition. No Dr. Shengtao interrupted. The Korth are professional soldiers who fight when necessary. What we're seeing with humans is different. They don't have warriors, they are warriors. Every human, from children to elderly, seems to possess an instinctive understanding of combat and survival that would take our best soldiers years to develop. The evidence continued to mount. Long-range observations showed human children playing games that involved survival scenarios that would challenge trained military personnel from most species. Their educational systems seemed to focus heavily on what other species would consider extreme sports and survival training. But perhaps most disturbing were the stories from the few diplomatic contacts that had been attempted. Ambassador Zethkar activated one final recording, this one from a formal first contact mission that had gone horribly wrong. This is Captain Velnor of the diplomatic vessel Harmony song. We approached the human colony on Titan's Edge as planned for formal first contact. The humans appeared friendly and invited us to share a meal. We should have realized that any species living on a world with gravity 3 times galactic standard might have different dietary requirements. The recording crackled with static before continuing. They served us what they called mild food suitable for guests. Our medical officer determined that the meal contained toxins that would be lethal to 43 of the 47 known spacefaring species. When we politely declined, the humans seemed confused. One of them, a female who appeared to be quite young, offered to prepare something more bland for our delicate constitutions. The recording paused, then resumed with Captain Velnor's voice shaking. The replacement meal tested as suitable for consumption by exactly 0 known species. When we explained this, the humans became concerned for our health, asking how we survived on such weak food. They seemed genuinely worried that we might die of malnutrition. Ambassador Zethkar deactivated the display and faced the council directly. Fellow delegates, we've spent centuries telling ourselves that humans are just another species, perhaps a bit more aggressive than most, but ultimately manageable through diplomacy and trade. The stories we hear paint them as monsters, as unstoppable warriors who know no fear and feel no pain. He paused for effect, his crystalline eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like stars. But I fear the truth is far worse than any story. They're not monsters who chose to become destroyers. They're a species for whom our nightmares are their children's games, for whom our most dangerous worlds are their vacation destinations, for whom our deadliest toxins are mild seasoning. The silence that followed was absolute. In that moment, every delegate understood that they weren't dealing with a species that had chosen violence or conquest. They were facing a people for whom the very concept of impossible didn't seem to exist, who found joy in challenges that would destroy entire civilizations. The vote to maintain the quarantine zone was unanimous 3 months after the Council's decision to reinforce the quarantine zones. Captain Sarah Chun received her mission briefing aboard the exploration vessel Endurance. The orders were simple enough. Investigate the mysterious energy readings coming from the Kethmoran system, a supposedly uninhabited cluster of dead worlds on the very edge of human space. Sarah had been chosen for this mission not because she was the most diplomatic of the human explorers, but because she was considered one of the more cautious ones. The Galactic Council's recent communications had made it clear that humanity needed to be more careful about their expansion, though Sarah had never quite understood why the other species seemed so concerned about humans settling a few harsh worlds. Approaching the third planet now, reported her navigator, Lieutenant James Park, a young man whose casual demeanor disguised a brilliant tactical mind. Energy signatures are definitely artificial, but the configuration doesn't match any known technology in our databases. Through the viewport, Sarah could see their destination. Kethmora 3 was exactly the kind of world that made her feel at home. The surface was scarred with massive canyons that plunged kilometers into the planet's core, while electromagnetic storms raged across continents of jagged black stone. The atmosphere was thin but breathable, though the constant electrical activity would fry most electronic equipment. Perfect weather for a landing party, Sarah commented cheerfully, completely missing the horrified expression on the face of their liaison officer, Subcommander Veltias of the Centauri Republic. The alien's blue-scaled skin had gone pale at the sight of the electrical storms. Captain, Veltias said carefully, perhaps we should conduct our investigation from orbit. The surface conditions appear quite dangerous. Sarah looked at him with genuine confusion. Dangerous? The storms look pretty mild from here. Besides, we won't learn anything useful without boots on the ground. James, find us a good landing spot near those energy readings. What Sarah didn't realize was that their communications were being monitored by a network of hidden observation posts scattered throughout this section of the galaxy. The Galactic Council had been tracking human expansion with increasing alarm, and every human exploration mission was now subject to careful scrutiny. At Monitoring Station Theta 7, Chief Observer Kawaiandao watched the human ship's approach with professional interest. His species, the Zinthkari, were renowned for their analytical abilities and had been tasked with documenting human behavior for the Council's Xenopsychology Department. They're actually going to land, he reported to his team, his tentacles writhing with what other species might interpret as anxiety. The surface conditions include Class 4 electromagnetic storms, temperatures that fluctuate by over 100 degrees within minutes, and atmospheric pressure that varies by 30% across the landing zone. His assistant, a younger Zinthkari named Polven, checked his readings twice before responding. Sir, those conditions would require extensive environmental suits and specialized equipment for any of our species. Shouldn't we warn them? KY Endow's optical stalks focused on the data streams, showing human bio readings from their ship. That's just at Polven. Look at their vital signs. Heart rates are actually decreasing as they approach the planet. Their stress hormones are at baseline levels. Either they're the most disciplined soldiers in the galaxy, or they genuinely don't see this as dangerous. Polven finished, his voice filled with disbelief. On the surface of Kethmora 3, Sarah's team was already making their way across the Stormlash landscape. The energy readings led them toward a massive crater where something very unexpected waited for them. As they crested the crater's rim, Sarah raised her hand to halt the team. Well, that's interesting, she said, her voice calm despite what they were seeing. In the crater below was a crashed alien ship, but not just any ship. The design was immediately recognizable from their database as Devactor construction. The Devactor were one of the galaxy's most advanced military civilizations, known for building vessels that could withstand almost any environmental condition. Yet this ship, clearly built for war, was torn apart as if it had been caught in a natural disaster. "Captain," called out Dr. Martinez, their xenogeologist, "I'm reading massive structural damage consistent with prolonged exposure to the electromagnetic storms. But that doesn't make sense. Devactor ships are designed to handle this level of electrical activity." Sarah slid down the crater wall with practiced ease, followed by her team. As they approached the wreckage, it became clear that the ship hadn't just crashed, it had been systematically torn apart by forces beyond its design tolerances. "James, what's our timeline on those energy readings?" Sarah asked as she examined what appeared to be an attempt to establish some kind of research station near the ship. "Still intermittent, but definitely coming from inside the wreck," James replied. "Whatever's generating them has been active for approximately 18 months. What they found inside the ship told a story that would have terrified most galactic civilizations. The Devactor had been conducting secret experiments on Kethmora 3, trying to develop new technologies that could harness the planet's extreme electromagnetic fields. They had established a research outpost inside their heavily shielded vessel, believing themselves safe from the planet's harsh conditions. They had been wrong. The ship's logs, recovered from a heavily damaged but still functional storage core, revealed the slow progression of a disaster that the Devactor had never seen coming. The electromagnetic storms weren't just weather phenomena, they were the planet's natural defense mechanism, growing stronger and more focused in response to artificial technology. Day 43, Sarah read from the translated logs. "The storms are showing unusual behavior, almost as if they're responding to our presence. Dr. Kethval believes we may have underestimated the planet's electromagnetic sensitivity." She continued reading as her team documented the wreckage around them. Day 67. Emergency protocols activated. "The storms have somehow learned to focus their energy on our ship's weak points. This shouldn't be possible, but the evidence is undeniable." Dr. Martinez looked up from his scanning equipment. "Captain, I think I understand what happened here. The planet isn't just electromagnetically active, it's electromagnetically intelligent. The storms are actually a form of planetary immune system." Day 91, Sarah continued reading. Final entry. "The planet has defeated our shielding. Dr. Kethval theorizes that we're dealing with a form of planetary consciousness that sees our technology as a threat. Evacuation is no longer possible. We can only hope that whoever finds this record will understand the danger." The implications were staggering. The Devactor, one of the galaxy's most technologically advanced species, had been defeated not by an enemy fleet or a hostile civilization, but by a planet that had actively fought back against their presence. "So," James said cheerfully as he finished downloading the ship's remaining data, "looks like the planet didn't like visitors. Good thing it seems to have calmed down since then." Sarah nodded as she watched the electromagnetic storms dancing across the sky above them. To her trained eye, the patterns were beautiful, complex, and utterly natural. "Actually, I think it just doesn't see us as a threat." Unknown to Sarah's team, their casual conversation was being monitored by the hidden observation post. Chief Observer Kawaiandao was frantically recording every word, because what he was witnessing defied every principle of xenopsychology he had ever studied. "They're walking around on a planet that actively killed an entire Devactor research team," he reported to his superiors. "They're treating it like a pleasant hiking expedition. The human captain just described the same electromagnetic storms that destroyed a heavily shielded military vessel as beautiful." The response from Council headquarters was immediate. Continue observation and, under no circumstances, make contact. As Sarah's team continued their exploration, they uncovered more evidence of the planet's defensive capabilities. The Devactor had attempted to establish 3 separate research stations, each with progressively heavier shielding and more advanced defensive systems. All 3 had been systematically destroyed by increasingly sophisticated electromagnetic attacks. But the most disturbing discovery was found in the ship's experimental data. The Devactor had been trying to develop new weapons based on the planet's electromagnetic properties. They had succeeded in creating several prototype devices before the planet's immune system had turned against them. These energy readings, Dr. Martinez explained as he examined the prototypes, they suggest that Kethmora 3 isn't unique. There may be dozens, possibly hundreds of similar worlds throughout the galaxy. Planets that are electromagnetically aware and actively defensive. Sarah considered this information with the same casual interest she might show for weather reports. Makes sense. If you were a planet, you probably wouldn't want aggressive species setting up military research stations on your surface. She paused as something occurred to her. James, add Kethmora 3 to the potential colonization list. The electromagnetic activity could be useful for our power grid projects, and the defensive properties would make it an ideal location for a research station of our own. From Monitoring Station Theta 7, Chief Observer Kwyandow watched in amazement as the humans began making plans to colonize a planet that had just demonstrated its ability to destroy advanced alien technology. The casual way they discussed settling on a world that actively defended itself against technological intrusion was beyond his ability to comprehend. His report to the Galactic Council would be brief, but alarming. Humans have discovered a planet capable of destroying advanced military technology through focused electromagnetic attacks. Their response was to add it to their list of potential colony worlds. I no longer believe we are dealing with a species that simply tolerates dangerous environments. I believe we are dealing with a species that is somehow immune to the very concept of danger itself. Dr. Felania Morris had spent 30 years studying human behavioral patterns from the safety of the Galactic Council's most advanced research station. As the leading expert on human psychology, she had been tasked with the impossible, determining whether humanity posed a threat to galactic civilization or if they were simply misunderstood. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A group of human explorers had discovered an ancient precursor artifact on the world of Zirian Prime, and their interaction with it had been recorded by long-range surveillance equipment. The footage was now being analyzed frame by frame in the Council's most secure facilities. Play the sequence again, Dr. Morris instructed her research team. The holographic display showed Captain Elena Vasquez and her exploration team approaching what appeared to be a crystalline structure buried deep in the planet's crust. Zirian Prime was not a pleasant world by any definition. The surface was constantly bombarded by cosmic radiation that would cook most species in their own protective suits within minutes. The atmosphere was a mixture of noble gases that provided no protection while simultaneously being mildly toxic. Most disturbing of all, the planet exhibited gravitational anomalies that could crush a being to death or fling them into space without warning. The artifact appears to be some form of precursor testing facility, explained Dr. Morris to the assembled council observers. Based on our analysis of similar structures found throughout the galaxy, it was designed to evaluate the capabilities of species that might encounter it. On the screen, Captain Vasquez was examining the crystalline structure with obvious fascination. "It's beautiful," she commented to her team. "And look at these energy patterns. They're almost like they're trying to communicate." What happened next will be studied by xenopsychologists for generations to come. The moment Captain Vasquez touched the crystal surface, the entire structure came alive. Energy patterns raced through its faceted walls, and suddenly, the humans found themselves facing what could only be described as a test. The precursors, an ancient race that had vanished millions of years ago, had left behind testing facilities designed to evaluate the potential of younger species. These tests were legendary throughout the galaxy, because no species had ever successfully completed one. The few civilizations that had attempted the trials had lost entire expeditionary forces to challenges that exceeded their abilities. The first phase appears to be environmental adaptation, Dr. Morris narrated as the recording showed the space around the humans changing. The already hostile environment of Zirian Prime became impossibly worse. Temperature fluctuations that would shatter metal, radiation levels that would sterilize most worlds, and gravitational fields that shifted from crushing weight to zero gravity within seconds. The expected response would have been immediate evacuation or, at minimum, panic. Instead, Captain Vasquez started laughing. "This is incredible," she shouted over the howling winds that had spontaneously appeared. "Elena, are you recording this? The kids back home will never believe we got to experience a real precursor trial." Her team responded with equal enthusiasm. Dr. Sarah Kim, their xenoarchaeologist, was taking readings while being alternately crushed by 10 times normal gravity and then floating freely as the gravitational fields fluctuated. "The energy patterns are fascinating. I think the structure is scaling up the challenges based on our responses." Lieutenant Marcus Torres, their security chief, was actually grinning as he was pelted by debris that would have been lethal to most species. "It's like the ultimate training exercise. Sarah, can we take readings on how it's generating these gravitational shifts?" Dr. Morris paused the recording and turned to her astonished audience. As you can see, their response to what should have been a terrifying ordeal was enthusiasm. They began treating the trial as an interesting puzzle rather than a life-threatening situation. The second phase of the trial was even more revealing. The precursor facility generated what appeared to be combat scenarios, projecting holographic enemies that attacked with weapons and strategies that had challenged the galaxy's greatest military minds. These scenarios were designed to test tactical thinking, adaptability under pressure, and the ability to work as a team when facing overwhelming odds. Most species approached these challenges methodically, using careful strategy and advanced technology to overcome each threat. The humans did something entirely different. They started experimenting. Marcus tried the frontal assault while Sarah and I flank left. Captain Vasquez called out as she charged directly at what appeared to be an impregnable defensive position. "If that doesn't work, we'll try something else." What followed was a demonstration of tactical creativity that defied conventional military thinking. Instead of carefully planned maneuvers, the humans tried dozens of different approaches in rapid succession, treating failure not as a setback, but as valuable information. They laughed when their plans didn't work, congratulated each other on creative attempts, and seemed to be having the time of their lives. "They're treating it like a game," whispered Dr. Keelenth, one of the Council's military advisors. "But their success rate is extraordinary. They're solving tactical problems in minutes that have stumped our best strategists for years." The third phase of the trial was psychological. The precursor facility began projecting scenarios designed to test emotional resilience, moral decision-making, and the ability to maintain sanity under extreme stress. Previous species had faced illusions of their worst fears, impossible moral choices, and sensory experiences designed to break their psychological foundations. The humans faced the same trials, but their responses were completely unexpected. When confronted with illusions of their fears, they analyzed them scientifically. When presented with impossible moral choices, they found creative third options that preserved their ethical standards while achieving their objectives. When subjected to mind-bending sensory experiences, they described them as really cool and asked if they could experience them again. The psychological phase is supposed to test for mental breaking points, DR. Maurice explained to her increasingly disturbed audience. Every species has psychological limits that can be exploited. The precursors used this phase to determine whether a species was mentally stable enough for advancement to higher levels of cosmic awareness. She gestured to the screen where Captain Vasquez was calmly talking her way through what appeared to be a complete breakdown of reality around her. Captain Vasquez is currently experiencing a scenario where the fundamental laws of physics are changing every few seconds. Her response is to treat it as an interesting intellectual exercise and ask her team to help her document the changes. The fourth phase tested creativity and innovation. The humans were presented with a series of technological and scientific challenges that had no predetermined solutions. They were given basic materials and asked to solve problems that required thinking beyond conventional scientific principles. This was where humanity's true nature became apparent. Instead of approaching the challenges methodically, They began combining approaches in ways that had never been attempted. They took principles from biology and applied them to engineering problems. They used artistic concepts to solve mathematical equations. They approached scientific challenges with the mindset of children playing with toys, unbound by preconceptions about what was possible. Look at this solution to the energy conversion problem. Dr. Morris pointed to readings from the human team. They've created a hybrid biological-technological system that shouldn't work according to our understanding of physics. Yet it's generating energy at efficiency levels we thought were theoretically impossible. The final phase of the trial was the one that had stopped every previous species in their tracks. The precursors called it the integration challenge. The trial participants were required to demonstrate not just their individual capabilities, but their ability to work together as a unified force while maintaining their individual identities and ethical standards. Previous species had struggled with this phase because it required balancing cooperation with independence, strength with compassion, and innovation with wisdom. The few species that had reached this level had either become too unified, losing their individual creativity, or too independent, losing their ability to cooperate effectively. The humans approached this final challenge with the same casual confidence they had shown throughout the entire trial. They worked together seamlessly, each individual contributing their unique strengths while supporting their teammates' weaknesses. They made decisions quickly but thoughtfully, balancing multiple perspectives while maintaining their forward momentum. More importantly, they never lost their sense of humor. Even in the face of the most challenging scenarios, they found moments to joke with each other, to appreciate the beauty of the experience, and to maintain the optimistic outlook that had carried them through every previous challenge. The remarkable thing, Dr. Morris noted as the recording showed the humans successfully completing the integration challenge, is that they never seemed to realize how difficult the trial was supposed to be. They approached each phase as if it were a natural part of their daily experience. The aftermath of the trial was captured in the humans' casual conversation as they prepared to leave the precursor facility. Captain Vasquez was making notes in her log while her team gathered their equipment. "That was amazing," Dr. Kim was saying. "We should definitely recommend this site for advanced training exercises. The scenarios were challenging but fair, and the learning opportunities were incredible." "Agreed," replied Lieutenant Torres. "Though we might want to add some safety warnings for other species. I got the impression that this trial was designed for people who are used to dealing with extreme conditions." Captain Vasquez nodded as she sealed her equipment pack. "I'll make a note in the report to recommend it for experienced exploration teams only. Some of these challenges might be too intense for civilian researchers." Dr. Morris turned off the recording and faced the council observers. "Honored delegates, I believe we now understand the true nature of humanity. They are not monsters, as the story suggests. They are not conquerors seeking to dominate the galaxy. They are something far more extraordinary and, in many ways, more terrifying." She paused for effect before continuing. "They are a species for whom the impossible is merely interesting, for whom challenges that would destroy civilizations are opportunities for growth and learning. They don't seek conflict, but they are incapable of being intimidated by it. They don't desire to harm others, but they cannot be harmed by experiences that would break the spirit of any other known species." The silence in the chamber was profound as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't dangerous because they were aggressive or hostile. They were dangerous because they were completely, utterly, fearlessly themselves in a universe where every other species had learned to be afraid of something. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called after the first reports reached civilized space. A human colony ship had encountered the Har-gas swarm near the rim worlds, and the initial intelligence suggested that humanity was about to face their first real test against a genuinely hostile alien force. The Har-gas were the galaxy's boogeyman. For 3,000 years, they had been the ultimate example of what happened when a species evolved for pure destruction. They consumed entire star systems, turning planets into breeding grounds for their warrior castes, and had been responsible for the extinction of 17 different civilizations. The Har-gas swarm has broken through the Kepler defense line, reported Admiral Zendar of the combined galactic fleet. They're moving toward human space with approximately 4 million combat vessels. Based on our projections, first contact will occur within 6 standard days. The mood in the chamber was grim. Many species had secretly hoped that humanity's expansion would eventually bring them in a conflict with the Har-gas, solving 2 problems simultaneously. Now, faced with the reality of that conflict, most delegates were feeling something uncomfortably close to guilt. Perhaps we should warn them, suggested Representative Quilnara of the Feathered Nest Collective. Regardless of our concerns about human expansion, no species deserves to face the Har-gas without preparation. What preparation could possibly help? Asked Ambassador Zethkar. The Har-gas don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't leave survivors. Even if the humans are as adaptable as we believe, there's a difference between surviving harsh environments and facing an enemy that exists solely to destroy. Unknown to the Galactic Council, humanity had already received word of the approaching swarm. The response had been swift and, by galactic standards, completely insane. Instead of evacuating their outer colonies or calling for help, the humans had done something that no other species had ever attempted. They had sent a welcome committee. Captain Maria Santos commanded the heavy exploration vessel Darwin's Dream, one of humanity's most advanced ships, but still little more than a research platform compared to the massive war vessels of established galactic powers. Her mission was officially listed as First Contact Protocols with Unknown Species, though everyone involved understood the reality of what they were facing. Long-range sensors are picking up the first Har-gas scout ships, reported her tactical officer, Commander David Chong. Approximately 1,000 vessels headed directly for our position. Captain Santos studied the sensor readings with professional interest. The Har-gas ships were unlike anything in the human databases, clearly designed for destruction rather than exploration or commerce. They moved in formations that spoke of millions of years of evolutionary warfare, and their approach vectors showed the kind of tactical sophistication that could only come from a species that had perfected the art of conquest. Fascinating, she commented. Their formations suggest they're expecting resistance from fixed defensive positions. David, are you getting any communication attempts? Negative, Captain. No communication on any frequency. They're jamming our sensors and advancing in complete radio silence. Most species would have recognized this as a clear sign of hostile intent and responded accordingly. Captain Santos made a decision that would be studied by military historians for generations to come. Open a channel on all frequencies, she ordered. Full spectrum broadcast. Channel open, Captain. Unknown vessels. This is Captain Maria Santos of the Earth vessel Darwin's Dream. Welcome to human space. We understand you may be traveling a long distance and thought you might appreciate some local information about this sector. We have extensive charts of local hazards and resource locations if you're interested in trade or information exchange. The response was immediate and unmistakable. The Har-gas fleet opened fire. What followed should have been the swift destruction of a single human vessel by overwhelming force. The Har-gas had perfected shipboard combat over millennia, and their weapons could reduce planets to dust. A single exploration ship should have been vaporized within seconds. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The Darwin's Dream didn't just survive the initial barrage, it began analyzing it. Their weapons appeared to be plasma-based with some kind of quantum resonance enhancement, reported Dr. Lisa Chun, the ship science officer. The targeting systems are incredibly sophisticated, but they seem to be calibrated for conventional defensive strategies. Captain Santos was actually smiling as the ship rocked under the Har-gas assault, meaning they're not expecting us to do anything unpredictable. David, let's show them something new. What the humans did next violated every principle of space combat known to galactic civilization. Instead of returning fire or attempting to flee, The Darwin's Dream began moving directly toward the Hargas fleet while simultaneously performing maneuvers that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size and design. "Captain," Commander Chong called out, "their entire tactical formation is designed around the assumption that enemies will either fight or flee. They don't seem to know how to respond to a ship that's approaching them while performing evasive maneuvers." The Hargast fleet, which had destroyed civilizations with their overwhelming firepower and superior tactics, suddenly found themselves facing an opponent that wasn't following any recognizable patterns of behavior. The humans weren't retreating, but they weren't attacking either. They were simply moving through the Hargas formation like they belonged there, dodging weapons fire with apparent ease while broadcasting cheerful updates about local stellar phenomena. "This is really interesting data," Captain Santos announced over the still-open communication channel. "Your ships appear to be biological constructs rather than manufactured vessels. That's incredible engineering. How do you handle the metabolic requirements for vessels of that size?" The confusion in the Hargast ranks was visible to anyone monitoring their formation patterns. Ships designed to work together in perfect coordination began making independent decisions as individual commanders tried to deal with an enemy that seemed completely unconcerned about being outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Meanwhile, at the monitoring station Theta 7, Chief Observer Kawayan Dao was frantically trying to document what he was witnessing. The human vessel appears to be conducting a scientific survey while under heavy fire from a Hargast assault fleet. Their captain is asking questions about Hargast biology and engineering as if this were a peaceful first contact scenario. The situation became even more surreal when Dr. Chen made a discovery that changed everything. "Captain, I think I understand why their weapons aren't affecting us as much as they should. Their targeting systems are designed for species that fight defensively. They're programmed to predict where an enemy ship will be based on conventional evasive patterns. But we're not following conventional patterns," Captain Santos realized. "We're moving like we're exploring, not fighting." The Darwin's Dream continued its impossible dance through the Hargas formation, collecting scientific data while somehow avoiding destruction by weapons that had leveled planets. The humans seemed genuinely more interested in studying their attackers than in defending themselves, and this fundamental misalignment of priorities was causing the entire Hargas battle strategy to collapse. "Their bioships are fascinating," Dr. Chen reported enthusiastically. "I'm reading cellular structures that suggest they can regenerate damage in real time. And the neural networks controlling their movements appear to be distributed throughout the entire vessel structure." "Neural networks?" Captain Santos asked. "You mean these ships are alive?" "Not just alive, Captain. Intelligent. Each vessel appears to be a separate organism, and the fleet formation suggests some kind of collective intelligence." This revelation led to another uniquely human response. Instead of being terrified by the discovery that they were facing living ships controlled by a collective mind, Captain Santos became even more interested in communication. "Open a channel using the neural frequency patterns Dr. Chun identified," she ordered. "Let's try talking to them directly." What happened next would be recorded in the histories of dozens of civilizations as the moment everything changed. Captain Santos, in her characteristic straightforward manner, began addressing the Hargas bioships as if they were any other intelligent species she had encountered. "Hello," she broadcast on the neural frequencies. "I'm Captain Santos. I realize you've been trying to destroy our ship, but I think there might be a misunderstanding. We're explorers, not warriors. We're genuinely interested in learning about your species and your technology." The response was immediate and shocking. The Hargas fleet stopped firing. For the first time in 3,000 years of recorded history, the Hargas swarm encountered something that confused them more than it threatened them. The humans weren't behaving like prey or like predators. They were behaving like something the Hargast had never evolved to deal with. They were behaving like curious children. "We are puzzled," came the response through the neural link. The voice was unlike anything in human experience, a collective consciousness speaking through millions of individual minds. You do not flee. You do not fight. You ask questions. This does not match any species profile in our genetic memory. Captain Santos responded with typical human directness. Well, that makes sense. We're probably the first humans you've met. Every species is different. We like to explore and learn about new things. Your ships and your collective consciousness are some of the most interesting things we've encountered. The pause that followed was filled with communications between individual Har-gas vessels as the collective intelligence tried to process this unprecedented situation. They were a species that had evolved to destroy or be destroyed, and suddenly they were faced with beings who wanted to understand them. You are not afraid, the collective voice observed. Should we be? Captain Santos asked genuinely. You've been shooting at us, but you haven't actually damaged our ship significantly. And now you're talking to us, which suggests you're intelligent and reasonable. Afraid seems like the wrong response. From Monitoring Station Theta 7, Chief Observer Kawaiandao was sending increasingly frantic reports to the Galactic Council. The humans have achieved first contact with a Har-gas swarm. Not peaceful coexistence, not negotiated surrender, not tactical victory. They've apparently convinced the galaxy's most destructive force to stop and have a conversation. The implications of this development would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. But in that moment, aboard the Darwin's Dream, Captain Santos was simply doing what humans did best. She was trying to make a new friend 6 months after the Har-gas incident. The Galactic Council faced an unprecedented situation. The most feared military force in known space had not only stopped their expansion, but had actually entered into what could only be described as a research partnership with humanity. The implications were staggering, and the emergency session had been called to address a question that no one had ever expected to face. What do you do when the monsters become friends with the other monsters? Ambassador Zeth Carr stood before the assembly, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights as he struggled to find words for what the galaxy was witnessing. Honored delegates, the situation has evolved beyond our most optimistic projections and our worst fears simultaneously. The holographic display activated, showing real-time footage from the human colony ship New Horizon as it approached the massive Har-gas bioship designated as Primary Nest Alpha. Instead of the expected scenes of destruction or tense military standoff, the images showed something that challenged everything the Council thought they understood about both species. Human children were playing with young Har-gas organisms in specially designed interaction chambers. The bioship had literally grown in new compartments to accommodate human physiology, while human engineers were working alongside Har-gas biotechnicians to develop hybrid technologies that combine mechanical precision with biological adaptability. This is Dr. Sarah Kim, reporting from day 183 of the Joint Research Project, came the voice from the transmission. The xenoarchaeologist who had helped solve the precursor trial was now serving as the primary liaison between humanity and the Har-gas collective. We've made incredible progress in understanding the Har-gas biological engineering techniques, and they've shown remarkable interest in our mechanical technologies. The camera panned across a vast chamber where something impossible was taking place. Human scientists were teaching mathematics to Har-gas juveniles, while adult Har-gas were demonstrating biological construction techniques to fascinated human engineers. The scene looked less like first contact between species and more like a university exchange program. The most interesting development, Dr. Kim continued, is that the Har-gas collective has begun asking questions about human social structures. They're particularly curious about our concept of individual identity within cooperative frameworks. Representative Quilnara of the Feathered Nest Collective interrupted the transmission. Are we to understand that the galaxy's most destructive force is now taking sociology lessons from the galaxy's most unpredictable species? Dr. Zentao, the Council's xenobiologist, processed this question through his analytical systems before responding. That appears to be accurate, though perhaps not complete. Based on our observations, the exchange appears to be mutual. Humans are learning Hargast biological engineering, while the Hargast are learning human social cooperation techniques. The implications were terrifying in a way that had nothing to do with military threats. The Hargast had spent 3 million years perfecting the art of destruction through biological warfare and collective action. Humanity had spent their entire existence perfecting the art of adapting, learning, and finding creative solutions to impossible problems. The combination of these skill sets could produce capabilities that exceeded anything previously seen in galactic civilization. Show them a construction project, Ambassador Zethkar instructed grimly. The holographic display shifted to show the Zirian system, where human colonists and Hargast bioships were working together on what appeared to be the largest engineering project in recorded history. They were building something that defied classification, a structure that was simultaneously biological and mechanical, massive enough to be visible from orbit yet delicate enough to support complex life forms. The humans call it a research habitat, Dr. Zintal explained. The Hargast refer to it as a growth nexus. Together, they appear to be creating a completely new form of space-based civilization. Council Speaker Velda, her ancient voice carrying the weight of eons, finally broke the stunned silence. We convened this council to address the threat posed by humanity's expansion. We believe that their encounter with the Hargast would either eliminate the human threat or demonstrate the limits of their adaptability. She paused, her ancient eyes reflecting the wisdom and weariness of countless ages. Instead, we have witnessed something that our models never predicted. Humanity has not been destroyed or limited by contact with our greatest fear. They have made friends with it. The chamber erupted in agitated conversations as delegates tried to process this development. The aquatic Mertai were producing stress bubbles in their diplomatic pools, while the gas-based ethereals flickered with patterns that indicated severe confusion. "There's more," Ambassador Zethkar announced, bringing the chamber back to order. The joint human-Hargast expeditions have discovered something in the deep void regions that may explain both species' unique characteristics. The display showed data from long-range exploration missions that had been conducted by the Unlikely Alliance. Far beyond the galaxy's spiral arms, in a vast emptiness between star systems, the joint expeditions had found evidence of ancient structures that predated known civilization. These structures appear to be precursor origin, Dr. Zintal reported, but unlike any previously discovered, they seem to be designed not for testing individual species, but for facilitating contact between specific types of civilizations. The discovery was revolutionary. The precursors, it seemed, had not just created tests for individual species development. They had created mechanisms to bring together species with complementary capabilities, fostering the development of hybrid civilizations that could achieve things impossible for either species alone. The Hargast were never meant to be purely destructive, Dr. Zintal continued. Their biological engineering capabilities and collective intelligence were designed to complement another species' individual creativity and adaptability. The reason they became purely destructive was because they never found their intended partners. Until now, Council Speaker Velda observed quietly. The full implications began to sink in. Humanity's casual approach to impossible challenges hadn't just allowed them to survive contact with the Hargast. It had allowed them to complete an ancient design that had been waiting for millions of years for the right combination of species characteristics. The humans don't see the Hargast as monsters, Ambassador Zethkar realized. They see them as people with different capabilities, and the Hargast, for the first time in their species' existence, are experiencing what it means to create rather than destroy. The transformation was visible in the updated reports from the joint colonies. Hargast bioships that had once served as weapons of mass destruction were now growing gardens, creating art, and developing new forms of life specifically designed to enhance rather than destroy existing ecosystems. Human colonists were learning to think in terms of biological systems rather than mechanical ones, creating technologies that lived and grew rather than simply functioned. But perhaps most disturbing to the Galactic Council was the evidence that both species were actively trying to share their discoveries with the rest of the galaxy. The joint expeditions had sent several diplomatic messages offering to share their technological breakthroughs and invite other species to participate in their research projects. They're not trying to dominate or conquer, Representative Quilnara observed with wonder. They're trying to include everyone. The offers of inclusion were comprehensive and apparently genuine. The Human-Hargas Alliance had developed new technologies for environmental adaptation that could allow any species to colonize previously impossible worlds. They had created biological-mechanical hybrids that could solve resource scarcity problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Most importantly, they had demonstrated that even the most fundamental differences between species could become strengths when approached with genuine curiosity rather than fear. The question before us now, Council Speaker Velda announced, is not whether humanity poses a threat to galactic civilization. The question is whether we are ready to accept the invitation to become something greater than we have ever been. The debate that followed would last for months, but the conclusion was inevitable. Species after species began to acknowledge that their fears of humanity had been based on fundamental misunderstandings. Humans weren't dangerous because they were aggressive or hostile. They weren't monsters because they sought to destroy or conquer. They were dangerous because they looked at the universe and saw possibilities instead of limitations. They were monsters because they refused to accept that anything was impossible, including friendship with the galaxy's greatest fears. The stories that had once painted humans as unstoppable destroyers were replaced by new stories. Stories of a species that could look at the most hostile environments in the universe and see potential homes. Stories of people who could face the galaxy's greatest weapons and see opportunities for friendship. Stories of a civilization that measured success not by what they could destroy, but by what they could build together with anyone willing to try. The Galactic Council's final resolution was simple and unanimous. Humanity would be welcomed not as conquerors or as threats, but as teachers. Teachers of a lesson that the galaxy had forgotten in its millions of years of civilization, the lesson that there was no problem too large, no challenge too difficult, and no difference too fundamental to overcome with genuine curiosity, open minds, and the simple human belief that everything was possible. The truth was worse than any story told about humans as monsters. They weren't monsters at all. They were hope made manifest, curiosity given form, and the living proof that the universe was far more wonderful and far less frightening than anyone had dared to believe. And that perhaps was the most terrifying and beautiful truth of all. The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire stood to address the assembly. His 6 arms gestured dramatically, crystalline eyes gleaming with barely contained fear as he spoke to the gathered representatives of 47 different species. Honored delegates, we can no longer ignore the growing threat that approaches our borders. The humans have expanded beyond their quarantine zone, and the stories we hear from the Outer Rim systems grow more horrifying by the day. Murmurs rippled through the vast circular chamber. Representatives from species spanning the galaxy shifted nervously in their specialized seating arrangements. The aquatic Mertai bobbed anxiously in their water-filled diplomatic pods, while the gas-based ethereals flickered with agitated energy patterns. Council Speaker Velda, an ancient being whose species had achieved spaceflight when most worlds were still cooling from stellar formation, raised her withered hand for silence. Ambassador Zethkar, you speak of stories. We deal in facts here. Present your evidence. Zethkar activated his holographic display, showing grainy images captured by long-range surveillance drones. The first image showed a human settlement on a world that should have been uninhabitable. The surface temperature readings showed extremes that would kill most known life forms, Yet the humans had not only survived, but were thriving. This is the world of Kepler 438b. Surface temperatures range from negative 160 degrees Celsius in the polar regions to over 200 degrees at the equator. The atmosphere contains methane storms that would dissolve our ship's hulls. Yet humans have established 3 major colonies there. The next image showed something even more disturbing. Human soldiers, if they could be called that, moving through what appeared to be a battlefield. But they weren't using vehicles or protective suits. They were running on foot through terrain that would challenge heavy machinery, carrying weapons that seemed impossibly primitive yet devastatingly effective. These creatures, Zethkar continued, his voice taking on a trembling quality, they don't just adapt to hostile environments. They seek them out. They find the most dangerous, inhospitable worlds in the galaxy and make them their homes. Our xenobiologists call it impossible, but the evidence is undeniable. Representative Quilnara of the Feathered Nest Collective stood up, her beautiful plumage ruffling with distress. With respect, Ambassador, adaptation is not uncommon among spacefaring species. My own people colonized gas giant atmospheres that would be lethal to most life forms. But you use technology, environmental suits, atmospheric processors, Zethkar replied. The humans do something far worse. They change themselves. The holographic display shifted to show medical scans taken from captured human equipment. The readings were so bizarre that several council members demanded verification from their own scientific advisors. These scans show human physiology after just 3 generations on high-radiation worlds. Their cellular structure has adapted to process radiation as an energy source, not through genetic engineering or technological augmentation, but through natural adaptation occurring at a rate that defies everything we know about evolution. The chamber erupted in shocked conversations. The concept was terrifying because it suggested that humans didn't just survive in impossible conditions, they incorporated those conditions into their very being, becoming something new and potentially more dangerous with each world they conquered. Dr. Zentao, the Council's chief xenobiologist, requested permission to speak. His insectoid frame clicked nervously as he accessed his databanks. I've been studying human expansion patterns for the past 50 standard years. What Ambassador Zethkar describes aligns with reports from across the galaxy. But there's something even more concerning. The holo display now showed a galactic map with human settlement patterns highlighted in red. Instead of the typical expansion from a home world in gradually widening circles, the human settlements formed in seemingly random pattern that made no strategic sense to conventional military thinking. They're not expanding for resources or strategic advantage, Dr. Zentao explained. Every world they've settled was previously classified as uninhabitable by our standards. They're specifically choosing the most hostile environments possible. Worlds with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, or dangerous radiation levels. Ambassador Mordun of the Silicon Collective processed this information through his crystalline neural matrix before responding. Perhaps they're simply a hardy species. Many civilizations have adapted to difficult homeworlds. That's what we thought initially, Zethkar responded. But the reports from our merchants and explorers tell a different story. These humans aren't just surviving on death worlds. They're thriving, multiplying, and, most disturbing of all, they seem to enjoy the challenge. The holo display showed intercepted human communications, translated into common galactic language. The messages were casual conversations between human colonists, but their content sent chills through the assembled delegates. Weather's been great lately. Only had 2 volcanic eruptions this week, and the acid rain has been light enough to work outside without full protection. Lucky you. We're dealing with a pack of those giant predators again. Sarah says it's good exercise for the kids to help with the hunt. Remember to send some of the meat our way if you bag one. It's been boring here since the earthquake swarm stopped. The casual tone of these messages, discussing deadly natural disasters and monster hunts as if they were pleasant weather reports, created an atmosphere of growing unease in the council chamber. There's more, Zethkar continued, his voice now barely above a whisper. The stories from trading posts speak of humans who laugh during combat, who volunteer for the most dangerous missions, who compete to see who can survive in the most hostile conditions. They call it fun. Representative Yilmoth of the Peaceful Garden Worlds stood up abruptly, her photosynthetic skin pale with fear. You're describing a species of warriors, but that's not unusual. The Korth Empire has a strong military tradition. No, do Shengtao interrupted. The Korth are professional soldiers who fight when necessary. What we're seeing with humans is different. They don't have warriors, they are warriors. Every human, from children to elderly, seems to possess an instinctive understanding of combat and survival that would take our best soldiers years to develop. The evidence continued to mount. Long-range observations showed human children playing games that involved survival scenarios that would challenge trained military personnel from most species. Their educational systems seemed to focus heavily on what other species would consider extreme sports and survival training. But perhaps most disturbing were the stories from the few diplomatic contacts that had been attempted. Ambassador Zethkar activated one final recording, this one from a formal first contact mission that had gone horribly wrong. This is Captain Velnor of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's song. We approached the human colony on Titan's Edge as planned for formal first contact. The humans appeared friendly and invited us to share a meal. We should have realized that any species living on a world with gravity 3 times galactic standard might have different dietary requirements. The recording crackled with static before continuing. They served us what they called mild food suitable for guests. Our medical officer determined that the meal contained toxins that would be lethal to 43 of the 47 known spacefaring species. When we politely declined, the humans seemed confused. One of them, a female who appeared to be quite young, offered to prepare something more bland for our delicate constitutions. The recording paused, then resumed with Captain Velnor's voice shaking. The replacement meal tested as suitable for consumption by exactly 0 known species. When we explained this, the humans became concerned for our health, asking how we survived on such weak food. They seemed genuinely worried that we might die of malnutrition. Ambassador Zethkar deactivated the display and faced the council directly. Fellow delegates, we've spent centuries telling ourselves that humans are just another species, perhaps a bit more aggressive than most, but ultimately manageable through diplomacy and trade. The stories we hear paint them as monsters, as unstoppable warriors who know no fear and feel no pain. He paused for effect, his crystalline eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like stars. But I fear the truth is far worse than any story. They're not monsters who chose to become destroyers. They're a species for whom our nightmares are their children's games, for whom our most dangerous worlds are their vacation destinations, for whom our deadliest toxins are mild seasoning. The silence that followed was absolute. In that moment, every delegate understood that they weren't dealing with a species that had chosen violence or conquest. They were facing a people for whom the very concept of impossible didn't seem to exist, who found joy in challenges that would destroy entire civilizations. The vote to maintain the quarantine zone was unanimous.